financing for development, and how UNDP, through this new facility, can contribute towards building financial resilience and underpin development. The launch will feature 2 panels. One, a high-level conversation led by the UNDP administrator, which will ask how insurance and risk financing can play in delivering and safeguarding development. The other, a senior technical panel with leaders from industry, government, and the development sector on how to practically bring insurance and risk financing solutions to vulnerable people and communities who need them most. Just one moment of housekeeping. There is a translation service into French. If you click on the globe on the bottom right, you'll be able to access the French translation. Just before I begin the event, if you like, I'd just like to share a few words of introduction. In doing so, I'm actually going to adopt from a media posting of my colleague Daniel Stander. Daniel, who for colleagues from industry may know, has joined us from industry after several decades of work as a senior advisor, essentially partly to help us talk to the industry in the language of industry. So I'm taking this from his social media post and adapting it slightly. And he is saying, we can't stop the ground from shaking or the wind from blowing, viruses mutating or rain falling, but we can and must find better solutions to stop disasters and crises from devastating lives and economies. Insurance is not a panacea, but we must reduce what we can risk, and we must take action on climate change that is driving up that risk. But properly developed and deployed in partnership with government and the private sector, ideas pioneered by industry can significantly limit the effect crises have on communities and countries. Insurance is based on several principles. A critical one is that the relative likelihood and size of an event, the location, when it occurs, and the cause can be meaningfully estimated. Knowing this, we can put plans in place, we can mobilize capital, we can pool risk, we can manage impact, and we can build financial resilience. These ideas really at the core of the insurance and risk finance facility. Before we begin the high-level discussion, what I would like to do is, first of all, is to kick off the event with some introductory words from Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, who is the United Nations Secretary General's Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance and Development.
People worldwide and across income levels struggle to weather financial shocks and build resilience. In a 2020 survey that included OECD member countries, nearly 50% of respondents concurred with the statement, "I have no money left at the end of the month." In the developing world, only half of adults can access a lump sum of funds during an emergency. Financial stress is therefore a universal issue. This reality has been worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic, which disproportionately impacts underserved groups. Yet, while people everywhere lack protection against sudden financial hardships, only a tiny fraction have insurance, which, along with savings, is the best tool to cushion the impact of shocks. Globally, in 2019, the average insurance penetration rate was barely 7%. Zoom into emerging markets, and the number drops even lower. In Africa, that figure fell under 3%. Insurance and risk finance solutions can help build resilience and overall financial health. These solutions are also crucial to help businesses make productive investments. There is evidence that with protection, farmers and entrepreneurs invest more in their businesses. Insurance is therefore a critical component to a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive world. Further, insurance plays an important role in 9 of the SDGs, ranging from inclusive economic growth to food security and gender equality. As UN Secretary General's Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development, I am a strong proponent of enhancing financial resilience for people and businesses. The financial inclusion community could expand their focus beyond payments and credit-related interventions into insurance and risk finance solutions. And there are promising developments that we could leverage on. For example, during the pandemic, we witnessed the digitization of financial services accelerate tremendously, including insurance. We see a growing number of new tech-driven solutions and innovative partnerships that are needed to address market gaps. Providers are also exploring ways to design products that help customers achieve better financial health. It is important for all of us to keep that momentum going. By understanding what risks customers are most concerned about, insurance providers can deliver innovative solutions to untapped markets while supporting customers' financial health. Policymakers and regulators have a key role in creating an enabling environment. They are needed to develop proper regulatory frameworks as well as promote public-private partnerships and risk pooling. Strong focus on concrete solutions supported by data and evidence is fundamental for effective and sustainable action. The launch of the UNDP's Insurance and Risk Finance Facility is therefore a very welcome development. I applaud and support the facility's goal to strengthen country and community resilience to socioeconomic, health, climate and other shocks. Your success will be vital to help achieve the SDGs by 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I would like to now hand over to the UNDP Administrator, Achim Steiner, who will take us through this next part of the session. Thank you, Achim.
Thank you very much, Jan. And thank you also to Her Majesty Queen Maxima for those inspiring words which really set the scene for us today. And I'm truly grateful that she found time to record these remarks, because as the Secretary General Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance, she is somebody who is extremely familiar with the topics that we are trying to address today. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, it is with great pleasure that I join you today for the launch of UNDP's Insurance and Risk Finance Facility. In a moment, I will also introduce our high-level experts for this event and ask them for their reflections on how insurance and risk finance are critical to delivering development and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. This is, in our view, a journey, one that UNDP takes with many others, including industry, government, other UN agencies and development partners, as we collectively see the wisdom of bringing insurance and risk financing much more to the center of development. In part, it starts with the Sustainable Development Goals themselves, with the way in which they embody almost every aspect of life and living from a development perspective, and the call to action they represent for engaging with all actors across the public, private, and civil society sectors. They demand a level of partnership across both the public and private that has not been seen before. Secondly, within development itself, as it seeks to deliver on the SDGs, there has been an increased realization of how important risk-informed development is and how financing of risk is the next logical step. We saw this through the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, last year's UN Financing for Development Agenda and Dialogues, and increasingly it is being seen as one key part of the UN climate negotiations and discussions, as we will see in Glasgow later this year at the climate conference COP26. Thirdly, the insurance industry itself has in many ways started to align its own growth with addressing climate change and the protection of countries and communities, realizing that it makes good business sense to work closely with countries to tackle the big challenges of the day, not just develop and market new products. Increasingly, they are bringing climate health and socioeconomic resilience into the heart of their business models. We now have a remarkable ecosystem of insurance and development actors working hand in hand. We have the Insurance Development Forum, led by industry, with close collaboration with the development sector, and we have the Insure Resilience Global Platform, led by the V20 G20 group of countries. And we have a clear commitment from industry and the development sector and the Secretary General's Climate Summit in 2019 to transform the lives of 500 million people through a market increase in climate risk insurance. Along this journey then, UNDP itself has also evolved. The launch of the Insurance and Risk Finance Facility today is the culmination of years of work. We have engaged in many of these global processes themselves and been there at their origin. For the first time, insurance and risk financing are also referenced as a key element of UNDP's recently adopted new strategic plan that will guide us for the next 4 years. We are developing new ways in which not only we can program insurance at the country level, but also integrate insurance and risk financing into much of what else we do, such as our large nature, climate, and energy portfolio. Insurance and risk financing are agnostic to sectors. They can apply to so much that we do with partners, with countries, and with many of you who are part of this call today. So I warmly welcome the launch of the facility today, and again, welcome you all in joining us today. Now, to the discussion. I have with me today two very distinguished guests, colleagues and friends indeed, who have, in their various roles, contributed hugely to the public-private partnership that is at the heart of the growing insurance development community. We are joined by the Parliamentary State Secretary of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, Dr. Maria Flassbart, who also co-chairs the Insure Resilience Partnership, and we have Denis Duverne, who is the chair of AXA, one of the world's largest insurance companies, and also, and I would say personally, even more importantly, chair of the Insurance Development Forum. So to both of you, a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us on this occasion. And if I may begin with you, State Secretary Flassbart. Germany has invested heavily in climate and disaster risk finance and insurance in these last 5 or so years. Why has it focused so much attention in this space? And how do you think insurance and risk finance will help countries to build long-term resilience to climate change and other shocks? So over to you, and once again, a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Akim, for this warm welcome, dear Denis. I'm looking forward to our discussion this afternoon on this extremely important topic. Ladies and gentlemen, the impacts on climate change on people and prosperity are obvious on every continent. Just recently, we had a brutal reminder of these impacts in Germany. All countries will need to take urgent action to better cope with and respond to climate impacts. In this regard, the German government is convinced that improving the financial resilience of countries and communities against climate risk is a critical element of safeguarding past and future development gains. And the need is huge, especially due to increased fiscal constraints resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Accordingly, with the Vision 2025 of the Insure Resilient Global Partnership, we have made a global commitment to work together. By 2025, we want to financially protect 500 million poor and vulnerable people from climate and disaster risks. And we have already come a long way. Insure Resilient partners and programs are currently active in 100 countries worldwide. In 2020 alone, these projects covered 137 million people. All these programs support the implementation of climate and disaster risk finance and insurance solutions to ensure that prearranged, predictable financing is available for rapid response, relief, and recovery in the aftermath of a disaster. While much more needs to be done to tackle climate risks and related loss and damage, enhancing climate and disaster risk finance and insurance can and needs to play an important role here. In fact, these approaches contribute to a paradigm shift from reactive crisis response to anticipatory risk management. And this is essential in order to ensure the long-term resilience of the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world.
Thank you, Dr. Flassbart, and thank you also for drawing our attention on this element of anticipatory. I think much of what we are trying to construct together is really providing the world with a better way of anticipating what lies ahead and therefore build the resilience to deal with it. And I imagine, Denis, if I may turn to you, that the Insurance Development Forum and the companies that are its members have also invested significantly in working with the development community precisely to tackle this interface in terms of increasing risks and their interconnection. So both in your own capacity, but also as the person who has led us so clearly and with such focus in the Insurance Development Forum, could you share with us a little bit why you think this coming together, first of all, to think jointly, to analyze jointly, but now really to begin to act at scale, also in facilitating that insurance development interface has become also something that companies have embraced so actively. So, Denis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hakim, and good afternoon, everyone. So the insurance industry has been present in emerging markets for many, many years. But in spite of that, as you know, and as Dr. Maria Flaxbart explained just a minute ago, insurance penetration in emerging economies is very low, which means that when natural disaster strikes, the percentage of losses covered by insurance is very, very small, usually less than 5%. Therefore, the insurance industry has come together at the time of COP21 in Paris 5 years ago now, and decided to join forces with UNDP and the World Bank to tackle this problem together. Because without the support of the development institutions, the insurance industry cannot solve this problem alone. And clearly, as you indicated, and as Queen Maxima indicated earlier, there is a need for anticipation to tackle disasters more effectively. And insurance, by its nature, focuses the minds on anticipation, because the price of insurance is directly linked to the quality of the preventative measure, the quality of the construction of buildings, the quality of the construction of infrastructure. Therefore, and also when the disaster strikes, insurance provides a payment which is almost immediate, whereas humanitarian support comes with months and months of delays, and the reconstruction is more expensive and takes longer. So working jointly with the development institutions and in this case with the German government, for us was essential and has been extremely effective in the most recent past with the Insurance Development Forum, the support of UNDP and the support of the German government.
Thank you, Daniel. Maybe immediately let me go back to Maria and also turn to this question of Germany invested in various ways into this tripartite agreement, which became in many ways a platform precisely for what we are talking about. And if I could just ask you to perhaps trace a little bit the genesis, also the thinking within BMZ, within the German government, of why this was seen as so timely and important. Clearly, climate change was a trigger, but as I said earlier on, I think we are also embedding this in a larger sustainable development goals perspective. And what are your long-term visions for this work and the engagement of others? Even though I think what is the parliament behind you, and we know that there is a lot of intense thinking and negotiation that lies ahead in Germany. But I think in terms of this kind of work, there is probably going to be universal support. So please give us a little glimpse also of where we might be heading with this in the future.
I'm quite sure that this engagement will have future in Germany, and that the coming government in Germany will support this project as well. So as co-chair of the Inter-Resilience Global Partnership, I have been engaged in advancing climate risk finance and insurance for the last 4 years. And I must say that I'm particularly proud of the tripartite pillar of the Inter-Resilience Global Partnership, which I had the honor to start with you, Hakim, and with you, Denis, exactly 2 years ago in New York. The tripartite is key for reaching the ambitious Inter-Resilience Vision 2025. It is a highly innovative model for how industry, government, and the development sector can work together to tackle climate and disaster risks. It focuses on combining the cooperative advantages of all parties, working with governments to address immediate risks and support the building of long-term resilience to climate change. Our vision is to continue working with our current and hopefully more and more partners to grow the program and extend its unique capabilities and combined resources to further countries. To some degree, the tripartite is already a multi-partite exercise if we consider the growing collaboration with the V20 and further countries. And I would like to warmly invite and strongly encourage more governments, donors, and others to join this effort to make additional commitments for climate and disaster risk finance and insurance. Because I am convinced we need to combine all our forces to protect those who are most vulnerable to climate change from its increasing and all too often devastating impact.
Thank you very much also for the signal that I think, as I do as well, I think we anticipate that Germany's role in fostering and facilitating this will continue. Now, Denis, looking at it from both your own experience at the heart of the insurance industry and leading the Insurance Development Forum, how do you think industry actors view their contribution evolving? I mean, the development landscape clearly is being fundamentally affected by these new and emerging risks, but also the insurance industry, its markets, the insurance economy, so to speak, is one that is evolving very rapidly. So I think it would be extremely interesting to perhaps listen to you for a moment on how do those in industry who already are engaged view what is likely to play out in the coming years. On the one hand, we still have statistics such as between 93 and 97% of people in developing countries lack insurance coverage, which is clearly, from a public policy point of view, a major challenge. But from an industry point of view, could also be a major opportunity. Are these two objectives of public policy, resilience, SDGs, reconcilable with an industry that also is facing significant new challenges and therefore perhaps new markets?
What we have started to build, as Dr. Maria Flaxbart indicated, with the tripartite for our sovereign and sub-sovereign program, I believe is the way to go, because now we have a methodology that we have built with you at UNDP and with the German government to cover 20 countries on their sovereign risk. We've started with Peru with the insurance of 50,000 public schools, where then the city of Medellin came second, and then we have a number of other countries lining up. And this work between UNDP, the local governments, and the insurance industry with the support of Germany is, I believe, a way to go. We are beginning to do something similar on the other objective that is being pursued by the Insurance Resilience Global Partnership, which is on the inclusive insurance side. So the insurance of people that are just above the threshold of poverty and can fall back into poverty in case of a major weather event provoked by climate change. We have determined a list of 21 countries, and we will apply the same methodology with UNDP and the Insurance Development Forum. And then we have a third, also very promising program, which was announced last week, where the V20, a group of countries, and the Insurance Development Forum have announced that they would, have indicated that they would formally announce at COP26 a program of GRMA, Global Risk Modeling Alliance, because we believe that to insure properly, you need to have a good knowledge of risk, good mapping of your risk. And with this risk modeling, we will be able to provide better insurance for those sovereign and sub-sovereign programs. So I believe the model that we are building with UNDP and the German government is really a model that we could further develop, and I hope that other governments join Germany to support the industry and the developing countries in building those programs.
Denis, could I just follow through with another question from the perspective of industry today? When you look at that landscape, what is perhaps the greatest constraint or explanation why this has not evolved faster, more naturally? Is it regulatory constraints? Is it familiarity with perhaps unknown markets or lack of familiarity? Is it that the products and tools were not necessarily available but are now being developed? Where would you say is let's say the curve of innovation or of change most likely to affect industry's ability to step up?
Okay, so I think there are different factors. For the inclusive insurance program, clearly technology is bringing new opportunities, both parametric insurance and the development of internet actors in the field of fintech, but also I would say microfinance institutions and others allow us to distribute products, our insurance products, much more cheaply to broader communities. And technology plays a role which can change the landscape of inclusive insurance. For sovereign and sub-sovereign programs, really, it's the work with development actors that is critical. It's, I would say, the advocacy that is gradually leading the actors, the development actors, and notably the UN system, to be convinced that insurance is clearly a condition for development and is part of the tools, along with loans and grants, that will make the situation much better for the developing economies, and that pre-financing has to be a critical ingredient of development finance. I think this conviction is more and more broadly shared, and I believe it's we need to go further in that direction to make things really change.
Thank you, Denis. And maybe, Maria, if I could just ask you for one more response. As you know, you have been at the forefront with Germany of curating these platforms, these tripartite agreements, Insure Resilience Forum. What is your sense? Are other countries beginning to embrace this from an international cooperation point of view, from a public-private partnership, learning platform point of view, or where do we need to reach out more in order to attract perhaps a growing number of partners to underpin what is really a global partnership that we have now developed? I mean, as Denis just said, we are active in, I think, 20 countries, so that is our objective just as a first cycle. And certainly, you know, in UNDP, from where we began a few years ago, where we are today, we also had to develop the literacy, the competence, and the understanding and the partnerships that allow us to now really at country level to be a valuable partner to governments, to the countries, but also to work with the private sector writ large. And yet we still need, as Denis said, you know, in order to accelerate this kind of platform, some of the upfront financing that allows capacity building, regulatory reform, policy making to succeed. Well,
you've described it very well. I believe that there is an element which needs to be fully understood, which is that there needs to be some part of the premium that has to be financed as part of those programs. Because if insurance penetration has not been greater, there is this element, there was this missing element of premium financing. So people understand a grant after a catastrophe. I think they need the development actors and the donor, the country donors need to understand that insurance can only develop if there is an element of concession in the form of some part of premium financing, which is not yet something that is well established and developed. But also all the development actors need to have in mind that the development of the support to the development needs to comprise a program where insurance has a part, because with insurance, there is necessity to understand the risks better, to qualify the risks, to take prevention measures. And that is a positive element which will facilitate the development and make it more durable. Having infrastructures that are insured, I mean, if they are insured, it means that the rock on which they're built is much more solid that if this has not been taken into account from the outset.
Very well. And Maria, may I throw the same question to you as well, in that outlook of building this partnership, particularly also of perhaps other countries coming on board, and what you have sensed in discussions over the last year or two?
I really hope that other partners will join us, that other partners will see how important this instrument might be for a more resilient development, for more resilience in infrastructure of countries. I just visited New Delhi a fortnight ago, and there we had several discussions about this instrument, about the idea of India joining this partnership. That would be a marvelous sign if such an important country like India, member of G20, would join this initiative. So I hope that we are on a good way to, let me say, to catch them, and that they go in lead for other countries, and just feel how important it is to be a part of this wonderful initiative.
Thank you very much. And I think one of the things that to me also is of a particular importance is that as UNDP now develops its capacity as an institution in its partnership, but also with the presence on the ground, what we're going to do is discover that in many countries across the world, there's a great deal of innovation happening in this space. And I think this is one of the things that has always intrigued me, whether you mentioned India just now, Kenya, in Latin America. I mean, there are already some fascinating examples of inclusive insurance, of new insurance and risk finance instruments that are being put in the context of climate change. And I think one of the great things that we can do as an international community is to connect this learning curve, because I think we are clearly looking at this a little bit from an enabler and a facilitator's point of view. But meanwhile, there is an ecosystem of experimentation out there. And the more we can connect that and allow countries and actors in industry to recognize these innovations, hopefully the quicker we will find precisely the kind of engagement that allows us to take this to scale. And I know that Denis is always conscious of the 500 million people commitment also, and so is Germany, and so are we. So let me bring our little panel to an end, because I know there is a very rich program awaiting all participants. Just to end by saying that I'm truly grateful to both of you for joining us for this launch today, and just to remind us that in the world we live in, we can all sense that risks are growing exponentially on a number of fronts, that too many people at the moment do not have any insurance cover. And even in a country like Germany, and Maria, I think you will agree with me, that disastrous flood of a few weeks ago, in the end, it is the public sector, the taxpayer, who has to step in. I think it was with a 30 billion euro financing package to deal with one disaster that lasted less than 12 hours and wreaked such havoc on people. And I think, Denis, as somebody in the insurance industry, I mean, the numbers that I have, in 2020, 980 disasters caused by natural hazards alone, costing $210 billion. I think one of the things that we hope to do as UNDP with this facility is to really help countries look at the optimal path of dealing with risk, and also to try and see if we can reduce the number of people who are completely uninsured, unprotected. And by some projections, the uptake of such instruments as parametric insurance, insurance-based backed social protection, or indemnity-based products could actually help developing countries reduce their financial losses by up to 25%. And these are very significant numbers. And yet another reason why I think in what we are together setting out to do, and many others are involved with, is truly something that speaks to the SDGs, to our moment in time, to climate change, and particularly also to the SDGs in terms of poverty reduction and the exposure in terms of vulnerability. So in that spirit, again, Maria, Denis, thank you so much. And I happily hand back to Jan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Akim. Thank you, Dr. Flaxvar. Thank you, Denis, for your eloquent words there and messages for the audience today. Actually, just before I hand over to the next segment, a couple of my colleagues told me that I did not introduce myself, so I'll do it now, halfway through the event. So for those who do not know, my name is Jan Kellett, and I lead UNDP's global work on insurance and risk financing, and it's a great pleasure to see you here today. What I'd like to do now is to hand over to our next guest, who is Carolyn Cohen. Carolyn is an insurance and fund management correspondent with Reuters. And she's going to give us a few words, if you like, in summary of what we've heard from the high-level discussants so far, but also contextualize it, if you like, in what's happening in the wider industry from her perspective and experience. And Carolyn, welcome, and over to you to give us a little bit of words from your side.
Thanks very much, Jan. And it was very interesting to hear the discussion just now, which does chime with a lot of things that I've been hearing generally from insurers over the years. I guess the key point here is this protection gap. And, you know, those are quite shocking statistics that less than 5% in developing countries are covered by insurance if disaster strikes. I know it's something insurers have been talking about for years, this protection gap, and it seems to be particularly hard to close. So it's great if this initiative with the UNDP, you know, can help insurers and governments to work together to try and resolve that. Something else that struck me, I think, was particularly Maria talking about being anticipatory, because again, yeah, that is something which insurers are always talking about, and I think perhaps it's human nature not to worry about things until they happen, and sort of to develop that mindset that you are thinking about things in advance, in building resilience in whatever way that might be, whether it means building your houses somewhere differently from where they're currently built, or even just sort of having better insulation, sort of anything to protect yourself. Again, is something I hear insurers talking about a lot, but I don't know whether we're all paying attention. And I guess the third thing that struck me really from this was the sort of mention of new products, because again, it's obviously something insurers have been working on for years, and always something that I'm wanting to find out about is new products. Parametrics was mentioned there. That tends to be where you buy a product, and instead of having to wait for the whole process of loss adjusters to come in, it will be triggered by a simple event like a specific amount of rainfall happening. I mean, that should get money to people more quickly. And again, that would be something that, you know, everyone would like to see, I guess. And of course, in this world of startups, yeah, we're hearing an awful lot about fintech and even the sort of slightly strangely named insurtech. We tend to hear about it in the developed world, and we don't tend to hear about it working so much in developing countries. So it definitely would be good to have that happening. And obviously, Maria has also been talking about the backing of the German government for this initiative, and how it would be great to see more countries involved. I certainly know that as a journalist writing about disasters, because I'm a business journalist, we always do tend to focus on the disasters that cause losses to insurers, and those are generally happening in the richest countries. And I just do think that, yes, other countries just get forgotten and don't get the same level of scrutiny, perhaps, that they deserve. And yeah, I think that was really that I wanted to say. But yeah, thank you very much, Dan. And thanks for inviting me to listen to this.
Thank you very much, Carolyn, for your words there. I mean, that final point you mentioned about perhaps a slightly perverse situation of the impact on insurers getting more attention than the impact on those countries where there is less insurance is one on which we're very much concerned about. There is some data actually in the video that we're about to show you. I can't remember the time span now, but I think it's for 77 of the poorest countries. There's losses of $440 billion, and actually only $13 billion are covered by insurance of that 440. Now that's a statistic that should get a lot of attention. Not perhaps those countries where the data where we see massive losses or significant losses from the insurance sector, and that's of course where we're working with Denis and the Insurance Development Forum and others to address. So thank you very much for your words today and that summary. What I'd like to do now is, just as we get the high-level technical panel just organized and ready, I'd like to just show to everyone a short video, just 3-minute video of the Insurance and Risk Finance Facility, which in a sense just very quickly tries to convey what is our understanding of the issues before us, but also how the facility can contribute together with the industry, with governments, to actually address the issues before us. So I'd just like to show that now. Thank you.
Sustainable development is under threat. Despite economic growth, poverty and inequality remain, and decent livelihoods are still out of reach for many. Population growth and increased urbanization, especially in low-income countries, strain infrastructure, leaving people without critical services such as energy, water, and public transport. These challenges are deepened by growing crises and disasters, causing political and financial instability. Much of this is driven by climate change, as floods, wildfires, cyclones, and droughts collide with insecurity and conflict, heat waves and earthquake, food price escalations, and the collapse of traditional industry. And the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has revealed just how fragile development can be, thrusting millions back into poverty. Developing countries are often the worst affected and least equipped to rebuild and recover from these multiple shocks and crises. Lacking financial protection, they can be locked into a downward spiral of debt, vulnerability, and ever-increasing susceptibility to crisis. However, it doesn't have to be this way. UNDP's Insurance and Risk Finance Facility is working with industry and governments to implement solutions that will protect countries, communities, and our planet. By securing energy networks, transportation systems, food supply, healthcare, and education facilities. By protecting vulnerable people from the risks of crop failures, business interruption, and health crises. By preserving the world's biodiversity, our coral reefs, forests, and mangroves. By reducing emergency aid and speeding up recovery. And more than this, scaling up insurance is not just about increased financial protection. It creates a virtuous cycle of increased growth, increased standard of living, offering new opportunities and new freedoms to choose. Join UNDP and our partners in our mission to ensure that insurance and risk financing sustain development, protect all lives and livelihoods, and build much-needed resilience in an increasingly risky world.
Friends and colleagues, thank you for watching that video there. I would like to now move on to the high-level technical panel. We've got an excellent group of guests with us today. To introduce them and to lead us through the session, I would like to introduce Marcos Neto, who is the director of UNDP's Finance Sector Hub. Marcos, it'd be great if you could take the floor, please, and take us from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan, for the introduction. Thanks for all the previous panelists, Administrator Dr. Flansbach. Denny, it's been an honor to be here to you. We've been working very hard, and I want to recognize Jan and all the team that has been working for many, many months to get to this moment. From my perspective as the director of UNDP's Financial Sector Hub, I see the formalization of UNDP's work in insurance and risk finance as one key way in which UNDP can work with the private sector to bring in technical expertise and capital to developing countries in an extent that was largely unheard of as recently as 5 years ago. But more important than this is the conversation we're going to have. So I'm very honored to moderate a very senior panel of experts from across the government, development, and insurance industry today, as we focus on what it means to work collectively in scaling up insurance risk finance for development. So we have Kamal Kishore, member of the Indian National Disaster Management Authority and co-chair of the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. Delphine Traoré, the Regional Chief Operating Officers and Regional Executive Board member of Allianz Africa. Fabio Marchetti, who is the Group Head of International Affairs at Generali. And finally, we have Ekeswei Yaohing, who is the Secretary General of the Insurance Development Forum, which you already heard a lot about it, a critical partnership of public and private sector in addressing risk financing development. Let me start with Kamal. And it was interesting to hear the Secretary of State talking about that she was in Delhi a couple of weeks ago. As you know, Kamal, we are the insurance risk finance facility is already working with you and our country office to figure out how better to bring this agenda down to India. And hopefully now with the German government talking to the Indian government, we can bring it all formally together in that sense. But we've heard from the high level panel on the big issues of how insurance and risk finance are critical for development. How does this translate into decision-making in a country like India? What are the key steps to take it? The floor is yours.
Thanks, Marcos. And in fact, Dr. Flashbath, I had the pleasure of receiving her in my office and having that discussion that she was referring to. So the fact that we are engaging in this discussion really shows that in India, the need for closing the protection gap, increasing the penetration of insurance is really something which is being recognized at the highest policy-making levels. I want to quickly make 3 points. The first thing I want to say is that for a large country like India, where the impacts of disasters, climate-related and others, is huge, the numbers every year are mind-boggling. We cannot have an insurance discussion without talking about poverty. We really have to, we talk about aggregate numbers, we talk about the total losses, but we really need to see how disasters are experienced at the level of households. And how do you exercise your imagination in devising insurance products that actually alleviate suffering at the level of a household? So that's my first point. My second point is that we really have to look at insurance alongside a whole range of other social protection measures. So one of the problems that is faced at the household level is that a lot of these social protection measures, a lot of these inputs, they do not synchronize. So the net effect of different schemes of support is really less than optimal. So how do we look at insurance as a suite of areas of support to ensure that people who are affected by disasters do not fall back into poverty? And the third point I would make is that we have to think about how we, particularly in countries like mine, overcome the trust deficit that is there between the insurance sector, if you like, and the people. I can give you, if you had time, I could give you numerous stories that I've heard from households relatively poor households about their perception of insurance and insurance industry. I know of cases where even if you provide, premium money to a household, they would be reluctant to spending that on insurance. They would sort of rather use that up for their day-to-day purposes. So how do we sort of come up with a risk language which helps us build that trust between the insurance companies and the households? One aspect of that is that we really need to, Rowan Douglas, of Willis Re Watson, has a very interesting line. He says that we should not talk about insurance as an industry, but we should talk about insurance as an institution of society. I think that paradigm shift really needs to happen in the way we look at it and the way we present it to the policymakers as well as our people. Thank you.
Thanks, Kamal. We might want to come back to you with one of those illustrative stories that you said you have many of them. Let me turn to Delphine. As an insurance executive in Africa, how does this resonate in the countries in which you work? What are the key areas you see to address? And how is your own company responding to those needs?
Distinguished guests and panelists, first, good morning or good afternoon, and thank you to the UNDP Insurance and Finance Risk Facility for the invitation. I have to say I fully agree with a few of the points that Kamal made, right? We cannot speak of bringing insurance to scale in Africa without speaking also of the impact of COVID-19 on the continent as a whole. The World Bank noted that the pandemic has pushed over 40 million Africans into extreme poverty, impacting mostly women, the youth, low-skilled workers, and also the informal sector. And these people tend to be the one that is at the heart of growing this continent. As people become poorer, they cannot provide food for their families, their health and well-being suffers, education of their children becomes secondary. All this in turn deepens the gender gap. Just these factors together affect the 5 Sustainable Development Goals. The first 5 are already at risk, and I can go on to see what is the impact of the other SDGs, but I will stop here. So this is what we have in common in Africa, before the pandemic and even more pronounced now. There are, however, some similarities and differences in how each market tackles the challenges. One commonality is that digitalization of our insurance offers is more crucial now than ever. And I think Dennis alluded to that earlier. Close to 500 million people in sub-Saharan Africa own a mobile phone. And this is expected to grow by 1 billion by 2024. More and more insurance companies are leveraging on this to access the most vulnerable with insurance products that is suitable to the need, but especially insurance products that they can afford. The way each country in the insurance sector and government tackles the issue of strengthening the insurance sector does, however, vary. Several African governments are strengthening regulatory and capital requirements on the insurance companies to ensure their solvency and also their sustainability. This is expected to help create a stronger insurance segment as well as boost jobs creation and also capacity building of the industry. Such reforms are also crucial to building the consumer trust and public awareness, which will lay the groundwork for government to achieve the transformation agenda and also insurance penetration that many of us spoke about today. Given the different level of insurance maturity from one country to another, the insurance products that are made available to increase insurance penetration also vary from one country to another. If we take South Africa, for example, which represents, as you know, 70% of the insurance premium in Africa, they continue accelerating growth through innovation and disruption. In West Africa and Central Africa, we focus on stimulating growth through regulatory supervision to achieve consolidation. Many insurance companies, such as ourselves at Allianz, ensure long-term growth prospect by essentially expanding through Pan-Africanization. So you asked about us as a company in particular. So we at Allianz, we have collaboration through various partnerships And we think that this is key to bringing insurance and risk protection to developing markets. We have gotten involved with the Insurance Development Forum that Dennis chairs, where we co-lead an insurance product development working group under the IDF tripartite agreement in Ghana and in Pakistan. We have also invested in a tech company, an insurtech company called Bima. Bima is present in 9 countries in Asia and in Africa, and they serve over 25 million users who live on less than $10 a day. And for most of them, they are buying insurance for the first time, which is helping with insurance penetration. We've also invested in a leading on-demand transportation provider in East Africa called Safe Border, so the people that are in East Africa would know. And through their network and their platform, we are also able to provide insurance product to people that would not usually buy it. So we're also building major partnership with telecom and banking partners where we can jointly create products that benefit the population as a whole. So in Africa alone, we are covering over 2 million people, and we are hoping, and 2 million of the most vulnerable, and hoping to continue growing there. One last topic is essentially agriculture. I don't think we can talk about sustainable development in Africa without talking about the agriculture sector and its importance on food security. There's more and more, it's more and more important now that we start investing into agriculture. And in particular, when we talk about parametrics, for us at Allianz, we've invested quite a bit to support small farm owners and be able to provide them with parametric insurance, which is, the new digitalization sector overall. So this is how, as a company, and us at Allianz, also as an insurance industry, we respond to many of the challenges that you've elaborated in the past couple of minutes here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder if we can have in the next round, the agriculture issue also pick up by you, Kamal, in India, in that aspect. Yes. You're the Secretary General of the Insurance Development Forum. We heard a lot about the Insurance Development Forum, and really its groundbreaking nature in bringing together public and private sector to build country resilience. Perhaps what I would be interesting is to hear from you, what do you believe has changed in the last 5 to 10 years to make, some of the remarkable collaborations we've heard already today a reality? So what changed it from where you see the perspectives that you could point it out and says, that has made it everybody come together and then here we are on those groundbreaking moments. Over to you, and it's good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you, Marcus. And I must say congratulations to you, Administrator Steiner, and the team for just the remarkable progress and being able to launch the facility today. So to your question, I'll focus on 4 things that I think have been really drivers of the progress that we've seen. But this has been a long journey, right? Yes, we've seen remarkable progress in the last 5-10 years, but it's been a much longer journey. So the 4 things I'll focus on is first, just climate change, increase in disasters, the experience of COVID-19 that we are currently going through as a community have just exposed the fragility of our societies, the fragility of our economic systems. And I think that this in turn has led to a situation where the experiences of disasters are not something that happen far away in Latin America, Africa, Asia. They're also very real experiences for people in developed countries. And with that comes a sense of urgency in terms of how are we developing appropriate risk financing instruments to help us deal with the impacts of these events. And in parallel to that, you also have a political context where adaptation has really risen on the on the political agenda and also within the negotiating space. And this brings to the fore, again, questions around the resilience of society, issues around how our public financial management system structure to cope with climate change. The second area where I think, or the second topic or issue that I think has also driven some of the urgency that we are seeing is related to just the constraints in terms of government budgets. We've seen this before COVID-19 in terms of a lot of governments really struggling with ridiculous debt levels. And I think that this has a significant impact in terms of thinking in public consciousness about how are we using our resources? Are we as efficient as we need to be in terms of leveraging existing resources? And also questions around how are we leveraging private finance in helping us to reach our development aspirations. The third area, which I think has also been quite a catalyst and is related to the second point, is I think the recognition and appreciation that when you think about climate risks and the complexities of these issues and these impacts and these disasters that governments are dealing with, there's an appreciation that this is not something that sits within the domain of one institution, one ministry, or just the public sector alone, or just the private sector alone. So there's been an opening up of, I think, the appetite within our different communities for collaboration, even across the private sector. You see an increased level of engagement between actors that historically would never have interacted with each other and really have been competitors. So I think that this has also opened a lot of opportunity for innovation. And then finally, from my perspective, I think that one of the critical developments that has driven progress is just simply getting operational, right? I think that in the broader discussions around climate and development, there's a desire and a thirst for implementation, to be able to see solutions. What are the insurance solutions that are out there that can actually reach people and have an impact on people, on poor communities? What are the lessons that we are learning from these programs? What are their limitations as well? What is it that we need to do to actually get them to scale? And I think that having those experiences, if it is in Africa, through the African Risk Capacity, where you had a proactive linkage between the insurance and scaling up humanitarian intervention or social safety net programs, have been really instructive for donor governments in terms of their thinking about the use of their financing, for their humanitarian financing, but also for the insurance industry in terms of new areas where they can add value to some of the development challenges that we are faced with. And in terms of the IDF itself, I've already seen, I would say, since 2008, when we started to get real operational with the institution, just a remarkable progress in terms of leaning in of institutions. Today, we have currently 11 companies with 60 members of staff that are actively engaged in projects across 14 countries. And that is in the space of 2 years, as the parliamentary secretary had mentioned when we launched the tripartite agreement in 2019. For those of us who are engaged in putting institutions into operation, that is remarkable progress, and also in an environment where we were dealing with a global pandemic. So I do think that there are a number of factors that have been at play over the past few years to drive traction, but it's also very much been a longer term journey of learning from experiences in our various communities.
Thank you. There's an interesting thread where you're looking at Kamal talking about the need that insurance needs to go and be paired up with other social protection schemes, right? Delphine bringing on the issue of governments having to create an enabling environment and having to create an aspects, and then bring in another sector which is very relevant for the Africa context. And I think what I love about what you said, Ikosue, is things gotta get real, right? Things gotta get practical. Things gotta get real. Instruments have to develop. They have to reach people, right? Otherwise, it's very, very esoteric. And I wonder, Kamal, if this getting real, right? Eventually, when I come back to you after going to Fabio now, might help with the human stories of people, wanting to buy. If they see peers, right, benefiting from having insurance, would that transform them? But Fabio, you work for Generali, one of the largest insurance companies in the world. Why is it important for Generali to work with the development sector?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Marcos. Thank you, Jan, for your leadership in bringing this together. Special thanks to UNDP and to the German government for their support. Well, Marcos, we're noticing that the insurance gap between insured losses and uninsured losses is growing and growing, both in developing and also developed countries. And this has led us to two main conclusions. First of all, we need to work in partnerships to address the major systemic risks. Nobody wants to see this gap getting bigger and bigger. We have witnessed this clearly with the pandemic, as it was mentioned before, where whole communities and business sectors have been severely hit. Now, the pandemic, but also the tremendous increase of climate-related extreme weather events, the growing number of serious cyber incidents are all issues that have proven that there is a growing insurance gap. And these large events are at times uninsurable by the insurance industry alone, but they are not uncoverable. And this is why we need to work with a different mindset and address these risks in partnership with government bodies and international organizations. Secondly, as an industry, we must increase the penetration of microinsurance solutions. Microinsurance for disaster relief recovery will lead to an increased likelihood of successful recovery. However, low-income or marginalized communities that have inadequate knowledge and access to these solutions are a problem. There's also the issue that was raised of trust, which is a key issue we need to address as an insurance industry and work together to find solutions here, and liquidity constraints that undermine the penetration of microinsurance within communities in the developing world. By the way, trust is also an issue that is very felt in many parts of the developed world, including Italy, of course. And so we need to make sure that microinsurance is tailored to the needs of individuals, addressing life, health, property, and business interruption from NatCat events and other events. And working with the development sector helps us to better match the needs through a fruitful exchange with who really has the experience in certain parts of the globe where Generali and the insurance industry are not still mainstream. Now, very briefly on Generali, we have committed to increasing premiums with social and environmental value by 7 to 9% in our 2021 strategy. And we are therefore expanding access to insurance protection by also developing microinsurance projects. For instance, in India, agreements have been reached with leading microfinance institutions which operate in rural areas, providing coverage to a large number of people on low incomes. In 2020, more than 1 million people were insured. And furthermore, Generali, through our partnership with Descartes Underwriting, offers parametric insurance solutions at a macro and micro level. At the macro level, these solutions can be used to directly protect the budgets of local governments and therefore reduce the financial burden after a disaster. An example of these are the Caribbean catastrophe risk with 19 members, or the African risk capacity that has 33 members. Working with governments and international organizations here is absolutely critical. On a micro level, these solutions help to protect the underserved population against financial losses that are caused by natural disasters. And examples of these are the agricultural solutions, such as India's crop insurance scheme, where policyholders contribute individually or through a group. And another solution created by the World Food Programme in Sub-Saharan Africa covers approximately 88,000 farmers against drought. So Marcos, to cut a long story short, partnerships are even more critical to resolving the global challenges before us. And the insurance sector has a key role to play, both because of its understanding of risks, as well as its experience in dealing with unforeseen circumstances. But this can only be done together with organizations such as UNDP.
Thank you, Fabio. Kamal, let's go back to you. India, it's a leader in this space that we've been talking about, and it creates and leads the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. How does India experience of dealing with multiple crises influence such a leadership role? And where could UNDP support India, both at home and beyond? So that's my second question for you, but feel free to also bring that human story and react it to what you heard from all the other panelists as well. Over to you, Kamal.
Let me talk, Marco, first a little bit about the human story, particularly in the context of crop insurance. So India's crop insurance program is one of the largest programs. But one of the bigger challenges in a program of that scale is how it is experienced at the household level. You may insure your crop against one peril, but what happens actually is something entirely different. So what is the kind of customization you can do at the level of a particular village, even at the level of a particular household? So turning that whole insurance scheme into something which has a public positioning of being people-centered as opposed to an insurance company-centered is really key. And I have in front of me on my iPad open the farmer interface, and that is one of the key things. That how does a farmer who is actually insuring his crops experience the interaction with insurance company? What is the kind of advisory he gets? What is the sort of, how does he calculate his insurance premium for different perils? How does he calculate the crop loss? How do his grievance get addressed? How can you do different scenarios? And all of that, it can't be in English. It has to be in more than a dozen Indian languages listed in the Indian Constitution. So I think that people-oriented facing of the insurance scheme is really important. Now, coming to Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, let me just cite one example. In the last 5 years, 5 airports in India, most recently the one in Delhi, one in Kochi, twice, Chennai, Calcutta, Bhubaneswar have been underwater or blown away by cyclonic winds just in 5 years. So, and this is a country where we have a huge infrastructure deficit. We are in an infrastructure building frenzy, and we just can't afford to have these losses. We really need to build better, build not just for the hazards that we experience now, but the hazards we might experience in the future. But whatever we may do, there will be times when the wind speeds, for example, in cyclone-prone areas, are going to exceed the design speed. And that's where I think we really need to bring together different infrastructure assets, create risk pools, create insurance schemes to ensure that we have predictable finance for quickly rebuilding, recovering that infrastructure when it is affected by disasters. In India, we have something called a Finance Commission, which basically distributes resources from the national central revenues to the states, including for disaster risk management. And there was a very nice consultation for it at which Ekosui was there and talked about insurance. And you would be glad to know, Ekosui, that as a result of yours and other colleagues' advocacy, for the first time in the Finance Commission's recommendations, developing a whole insurance system to cover mortality, to cover infrastructure losses, aligning it with other social protection got covered. So it's really high up on the agenda to look at not just ensuring crop losses, loss of lives, but also big infrastructure assets as they get affected by disasters. Thanks, Marcos.
Thanks, Kamal. Very, very, very good. Fabio, Kamal you've talked about partnerships and we've talked about instruments. But is that more than just products and tools that can be created, that you created? What else needs to be put into this kind of ecosystem that will allow for this whole exercise to gain even larger scale than we already seen in gain now?
Marcos, we see the partnership with the development organizations as a way to opening up new markets and serving new countries and populations, especially the most vulnerable. Our mission is really about becoming lifetime partners for our customers. So it is much more than products. We need an environment that enables us to create solutions. And this can be done, once again, only in a broader partnership with other actors of the private sector, governments, and international organizations such as UNDP. We do have, however, challenges that need to be addressed. First of all, communication. I mean, mobile technology, as you mentioned, has opened new channels of communication between people and governments, offering greater access to public information and basic services to all. No other technology has been in the hands of so many people in so many countries in such a short period of time. And UNDP had these figures that in a global population of 7 billion, we have 5.4 billion subscriptions. So this technology has really enabled connectivity to remote areas that were previously not accessible through traditional delivery services. So it is a must for us to distribute microinsurance products through this technology. New data sources such as satellite, the Internet of Things, and new modeling techniques such as machine learning and AI should also provide more comfort to the insurers and reinsurers. However, the big issue here is that mobile prices still remain too high for many on the community, and we need to address this issue. Secondly, the solutions need to be rethought. Traditional solutions, which have been product focused, designed for developed territories, they need to be reimagined. A traditional home insurance product will not assist a marginalized community member to recover after a catastrophe. So we really need to focus on need rather than push products. And we need to start thinking of simple products that can cover multiple risks, and also about bundling financial products with insurance products to make people's lives more easy. But I think most importantly, Marcos, is that from a regulatory front, we need to work together. I mean, in delivering basic solutions, adequate prudential and regulatory provisions should be enforced in order to ensure the soundness of the insurance markets, the protection of consumers, and the stability of the economy as a whole. And over-regulation should, of course, be avoided, but the insurance regulatory framework must be adopted to meet the developments in the market. And this can only be done in partnership with organizations such as UNDP that have a fantastic knowledge of the regulatory framework and really know how to resolve these issues.
Thanks, Fabio. I love your phrase of reinventing insurance from products that are push to products that are need basis. I think that the challenge becomes, how does one get close enough to the communities that you want to serve to really understand the need? I think that is an important element. If you're, turning of a phrase becomes a reality, and I would love to see that a reality. Because as you talked earlier, and I agree, I think the name of the game is to become practical, is to become operational, is to become real to people's lives. Now, in that sense, the IDF is becoming more operational. What is, we've heard about our tripartite agreement. What is your vision for it, right? And as we are embarking on the insurance risk finance facility, what would you like to see UNDP from us in accomplishing that vision that you have?
Okay, thanks. Before I get to the challenge to be thrown to UNDP, I'll perhaps reflect on some of the comments from Kamal and others. First and foremost, to say congratulations to Kamal. One cannot underestimate the tremendous amount of work that it takes to achieve that. So I just wanted to say it's incredible to hear of that positive development. To some of the other comments that were made, I think that one of the challenges that we've seen is that, and I have conversations with Denny, and I hope Denny is still on the line and he will hear this, about the fact that I think that the insurance industry can do a better job about speaking publicly about when it gets things right? So we hear a lot about the challenges and the negatives and all of those difficult experiences, as we should, because we need to know of them in order to be able to address them. But they're also, I mean, when you think about the underlying value of the industry and how it helps to underpin development, this is not something that is articulated or voiced quite or enough, right? And I think that this is an area where the industry really needs to do a better job. And for me, I think if I look at it from the inclusive insurance space or the financial inclusion space, there's been a lot done in terms of supporting poorer communities, in terms of access to financing, being able to borrow and lend, to also deepen their savings in terms of investments in productive activities for the future. But there is not as much focus in terms of how are we helping poorer communities better manage risk. And this goes to the heart of insurance as a third pillar of financial inclusion and the need for us as a community of actors within the development space to really push this. And this is why the work of the UNDP is so important. To the real question that you asked me in terms of the vision for the IDF, I think the vision is quite clear in terms of our objective being how do we leverage insurance and risk management expertise to help address and achieve the sustainable development goals and build resilience for communities, people, governments, etc. And as part of this, I think of it as two pillars. The first pillar, which is a long-term game. We are not going to suddenly develop risk management expertise at an optimal level. Even developed countries still have a long way to go. But there is a need for concerted, focused efforts in terms of supporting developing countries in actually deepening their risk management expertise. That means a focus on risk analytics, risk information, but it also means looking at the institutional elements. Fabio touched on regulatory issues and the kind of work that's needed in that corner. So I think that these are medium to long-term endeavors that we have to invest in as a community. And there's already a lot of work going on, but we can build on that. The second pillar for me is, again, to the point that you made, a focus on solutions. There's a lot of frustration out there in terms of having conversations around this. People want to be able to have solutions that they can tap into. I always say, if you're a poor farmer, you want protection, you needed the protection yesterday, right? So who is actually working on those solutions that you needed yesterday? So for me, when I think about the collaboration with UNDP, it is ultimately geared towards how are we creating the necessary architecture that can incubate the innovation that can help to address this very fundamental development risk management questions that many of our countries are having to contend with. The second element of this is how are we as a community investing in thinking through the kinds of protection systems that are needed currently for today, but in the future. And this is where I think hopefully there's a lot of innovation that can occur through the collaboration between the public and the private sector, but also civil society and academia, who have a tremendous role to play. So I hope that gives you a steer, Marcos. And so for me, the challenge to UNDP is extending our country work, deepening our conversations with government, not simply in terms of, yes, the long-term vision of capacity development, but fundamentally, what are the kinds of solutions that governments and sub-sovereign entities need?
Thank you. And that's a very good challenge for us to take forward in partnerships with you. Delphine, the last word will be yours, right? I think you heard a lot, and I think you've provoked some of this conversation by bringing issues of regulation and the agriculture sector to the table earlier in our chat. So feel free to bring in all that you heard to close us here. But in your experience, and I think we heard a lot about partnerships, what are the key hurdles in delivering on the promise of the growing partnerships between insurance industry and development community, right? And what would you tell both the development in the community and the insurance industry that needs to change for the promise of the partnership to become a reality of impact?
Thank you. Maybe I'll start with Ikusui said something that kind of touched to the heart of the industry, where she said the insurance industry needs to speak a bit more publicly when we get things right. And I think she's 100% right on this. We don't do enough of this. And as we continue working through our various partnerships, operational execution will be key, right? And in the end, we are going to be measured on how we reduce the statistics that we've seen on the video that showed earlier. How are we going to reduce, the protection gap? How are we going to make sure that we are increasing insurance penetration? At the end, it's going to be all about execution. So it's important that we have those meetings and alignments, but we also need to be able to see how our work is impacting the woman on the ground that is selling tomatoes at the market of Accra, for example. So I think that's going to be important for us. There's also an important aspect of getting to know our people a bit better. And I can't remember who made the point earlier, is that for us to be able to provide products that are going to help sustain our people is to make sure that we are on the ground in the countries, in the rural areas, to understand the needs of the people that we're trying to insure. The other aspect is we're going to have to be a bit more agile, right? I think we need to do a bit more. Nobody could have imagined COVID-19. It caught everybody by surprise, and I don't think anyone in the group, in the world, was ready for this. And in turn, it pushed, looking at the video globally, almost 125 million into poverty. So what's going to be essential for us as a community, so as an insurance industry sector, as private sector, but also with the development agencies as a whole, is to see how we can improve our agility when it comes to microeconomic changes that could arrive suddenly. It's important for us to continue working towards improving the livelihoods of the most vulnerable. But the solution that we haven't yet, at least I haven't seen yet, that we have not been able to kind of put our minds around is what happens if there's another major macroeconomic impact like we had earlier. So mitigation and adaptation to climate change remains fundamental, right, to bring insurance and risk protection to scale in all these our developing countries, both in the medium and in the long run. Our population need to understand what we are selling. They need to be able to access our products quite easily from where they sit without having to travel to get it. And these products need to fit their needs. And they need to be able to afford it. That's more important. There's no point in creating products that are suitable to the need of the most vulnerable, but they are not able to afford it. So then we're back to square one. And as a closing comment, I would say, I'm really grateful to have been part of this discussion. I'm very encouraged by the work that the IDF is doing and that the UNDP is doing, especially with these discussions that are started. On behalf of Allianz, we continue being proactive and willing participants to reducing the insurance protection gap across the world, and especially into developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delphine. And thank you very much, Exue, Kamal, Fabio. I think it was a very rich conversation. I take it out of it. One, partnerships are important. We've gone a long way in bringing development and insurance industries together, but we need more, right? I think the second thing I take away is we need to understand, if we are to close the insurance gap, we need to understand not only the reality of governments and the ecosystem and the policy environment, but we're going to actually have to understand the final client. We're going to have to understand the needs of that final client better, not only to design the product, right, in the way that fulfills their needs, as Fabio said, not a push, but a pull for the need that they see, but to do it in a way that, as Delphine said, it's affordable, it's clear, it's easy, it is right there in their hands in whatever circumstances they have, right? So that understanding of the final client here becomes really an essential element for it. And I like Xue's point that, I don't know if it is just the IDF or the insurance industry that doesn't say the good things that it does. I think a lot of us have a tendency not to. So I hope that today we are starting to clearly tell a joint story of success to all those of you that have joined us from wherever you are. and an invitation is open for you us to join us, join UNDP, join Generali, Allianz, the Indian government, IDF. We are here. We can only deal with those things together. Thank you very much for your time, for the panelists, for all of you who listen. Jan, I'll turn back to you to start wrapping up the procedures. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marcus, and thank you very much to our high-level technical panel for those words, which are really definitely very welcome and very useful as we continue the discussion. As the last segment for today, what I would like to do now is to call upon Hao Yang. Hao Yang is our UN Assistant Secretary General and Director of our Bureau, UNDP's Bureau for Policy and Programme Support, to offer his reflection and also to help us close the event right now. Hao Yang, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jan. It's really great that we have this event to launch UNDP's insurance and risk finance facility. Let me again thank the government of Germany, for its generous support, to allow us to move this part of the financing for development agenda forward. A lot has been said, and really, great discussions, from the two panels, and let me try, to reflect on a few points. I don't think I can do justice summarizing all the points, but a few personal reflections, perhaps. One is that the need, seems to be really significant. Okay, the need for different kinds of financing schemes to manage risks is significant, and we see that climate, a lot of colleagues talked about the consequences of climate change, right? We see that COVID-19 pandemic has also shown how fragile, our development is. Like for the first 30 years, since we started to measure Human Development Index, we see a decline for the first time, and more than 100 million people, have been pushed back into poverty as a result. There are estimates to say that in the 1990s, in the 1970s, and the climate and the weather-related disasters, the cost of that is $49 million a day. This has increased sevenfold to $383 million a day, losses from these kind of events. So there's a question of, how does the society, governments and the private individuals bear the cost of this, right? Kamal mentioned repeated, flooding, right? And the cost, of infrastructure, to the new infrastructure that's built. So I think the need, for protection, for products that can weather these, risks is really significant. That's the impression I'm getting. The second point, very quickly, is that the insurance and the risk financing are seen as a set of critical tools, right, to manage these risks and stabilize their financial costs. So this is what we're seeing. So there's an increasing sort of trend, to look to these tools as a solution, right? And so I think we know that insurance helps to remove some of the risks from the most critical aspects of life and living, right? So in terms of the risks in the public assets, public services, employment and the livelihoods and so forth. So I think this is a critical point for UNDP, that it's really not just about the insurance products, tools and services. It's really about how we can use insurance and as a springboard for growth, to create the cushion that's needed for growth, create the capital pool that are necessary. And this is in part because the insurance does free up great amount of capital for investment but also, it provides ease of mind or peace of mind, that you can bring, to socio-economic climate and health insurance. This can bring, right, the peace of mind. So I think this is why we're dealing with this. I think colleagues have mentioned Fabio mentioned really we needed to provide simple products, bundled products, digital outreach, and so forth. Right? That's really help people to have peace of mind. And the third point, very quickly, what I'm getting is that a lot of work needs to be done. Okay, I think several colleagues mentioned how much more work needs to be done. Or several panelists mentioned this in different aspects. Right? The understanding of the products, right? The trust issue, the regulatory framework, right? And the adjustment of the industry from more developed markets to nascent emerging markets, so I think really a lot of work needs to be done. And the colleagues also talked about the protection gap. The indication I have, I think based on a study by Swiss Re, I understand, is that the protection gap from a few types of events, okay, from global health, from mortality and from natural catastrophe. And just from these events, the protection gap is $1.4 trillion across the board. Right? So while the need is significant, but also a lot more work needs to be done, right? And there's a reason why the penetration rate, of insurance, market is still very, very low, in many markets. So we needed to work together to deal with all these kind of set of issues that have been raised. And that's my final point, is that as we launch, this insurance and risk finance facility today, and I would like to say that we see this work as a part of UNDP's effort to expand financing for development options. So this is really what we're trying to do, right? To help expand the options for financing for development. And we see this facility as a key element of how we will work with the countries and the industry to build financial resilience and to sustain development. I think it is really designed, this facility is designed to be a catalyst to help connect the dots, especially at the country level. I think that several colleagues mentioned that why they would like to work with the UNDP, right? And we do have a network of country offices across the globe, right? And we can be a really effective convener of the discussions, ideas, and solutions. Right? We do need to get to the solutions. So I think UNDP can really be the platform that offers a place to put things together, to sound out the ideas and test solutions, and eventually really achieve our goal of more resilience in our society and safeguard the results of our development. So these are some of the reflections that I can offer as a closing remarks. So the task ahead of us is not going to be easy, but working together will provide the best chance to achieve our goal. So let's work together. And thank you very much for everyone's participation today. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Xiaoyang. Thank you for those wise words and comments at the end. I mean, there was a lot to take away from there, but I guess the one thing which really is the closing comment here would be the role of UNDP as a platform and how we can use this facility to drive forward so many different kinds of conversations in different levels, and for our partners to really see us in that way. So just a final few words really from me now. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone, colleagues, thank you very much for joining us today and helping us launch the Insurance and Risk Finance Facility of UNDP. We would welcome you to follow our work. You can do so. We have a microsite, which you can see at irff.undp.org. Please take a look at that. That's where a lot of our resources will go, training and so forth, and resources and partnerships and networks. And on social media, we're using the hashtag insurance for SDGs. And please follow that as well. That's what we'll be using in order to talk about our work on the various social media platforms. And finally, as we've highlighted today, achieving the ambitious goals that we've articulated will certainly depend on partnerships. It came through basically in both the panels, perhaps particularly in the technical panel, in the sense that almost all of the different participants mentioned the importance of partnership. So I would say there's an open offer for you to contact myself and the team if you have any questions or you'd like to work with us, discuss with us in any capacity. That's an offer to everyone, and really we'd welcome that and look forward to moving this agenda forward together. And then this is my final point. I'm closing the event today, but as you leave, what we'd just like to do is just to play out the facility video one last time. So you watch that as you leave or as you need to. And thank you very much for your attendance. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sustainable development is under threat. Despite economic growth, poverty and inequality remain, and decent livelihoods are still out of reach for many. Population growth and increased urbanization, especially in low-income countries, strain infrastructure, leaving people without critical services such as energy, water, and public transport. These challenges are deepened by growing crises and disasters, causing political and financial instability. Much of this is driven by climate change, as floods, wildfires, cyclones, and droughts collide with insecurity and conflict, heat waves and earthquake, food price escalations, and the collapse of traditional industry. And the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has revealed just how fragile development can be, thrusting millions back into poverty. Developing countries are often the worst affected and least equipped to rebuild and recover from these multiple shocks and crises. Lacking financial protection, they can be locked into a downward spiral of debt, vulnerability, and ever-increasing susceptibility to crisis. However, it doesn't have to be this way. UNDP's Insurance and Risk Finance Facility is working with industry and governments to implement solutions that will protect countries, communities, and our planet. By securing energy networks, transportation systems, food supply, healthcare, and education facilities. By protecting vulnerable people from the risks of crop failures, business interruption, and health crises. By preserving the world's biodiversity, our coral reefs, forests, and mangroves. By reducing emergency aid and speeding up recovery. And more than this, scaling up insurance is not just about increased financial protection. It creates a virtuous cycle of increased growth, increased standard of living, offering new opportunities and new freedoms to choose. Join UNDP and our partners in our mission to ensure that insurance and risk financing sustain development, protect all lives and livelihoods, and build much-needed resilience in an increasingly risky world.